Dear reader, as a child, I loved the movie Clue. One of my favorite things about this film was that it had 3 different endings. Ever since I started writing, I've wanted to write a book with alternate endings, but I never knew quite how to do it until I was working on A Curse for True Love. If you've already read A Curse for True Love, then you are probably familiar with the Magnificent North story curse. This curse was first mentioned in Once Upon a Broken Heart when Evangeline explains that in the Magnificent North, fairy tales and history are treated as one and the same, since the northern stories and histories have all been cursed. Some tales cannot be written down without bursting into flames. Others cannot leave the north, and many others change every time they are shared, becoming less and less real with every retelling. In the case of Evangeline's favorite fairy tale, The Ballad of the Archer and the Fox, no one can remember the end of it. Other stories in the north, like the Valerie, have alternate endings and no one knows which one is true. Since A Curse for True Love will be considered a northern fairy tale, it made sense to me that it would be affected by the story curse, and so it seemed like the perfect book to write alternate endings for. If you are reading this letter, you are in possession of an edition of A Curse for True Love that has one of 3 alternate endings, which I've written in the form of bonus epilogues. Once upon a time, I actually considered using each of these epilogues as the actual ending for Curse, but I love how the book ends now. I love endings that leave a bit to the imagination. However, I imagine that any reader picking up a special edition will be the sort of reader who will want a little bit more. So here I am, giving you more. Just remember, the alternate ending you are about to read is not officially part of the book. It is merely bonus material. I see it as what could be, rather than what actually happened. XO, Stephanie. Bonus Epilogue. The Hollow. In for travelers, adventurers, and those searching for happily ever after. There was a time, not too long ago, when the only place in the world Evangeline Fox wanted to be was in her father's curiosity shop. For so long, she believed she could never love any place as much as she loved that shop. With its magical little bell on the door, its crates full of oddities, and the endless memories of her parents that lived between its wondrous walls. The curiosity shop hadn't simply felt like home, it had felt like part of her. And yet, when Jax told Evangeline that together they could go anywhere, the curiosity shop was not the place that came to mind. "Let's go to the Hollow," she'd said. He'd looked taken aback, and perhaps a little nervous. It was difficult to be sure with the bruises and cuts fresh on his face from the fight with the Valors. But even without considering his expression, Evangeline sensed that Jax was as anxious about losing her as she was about losing him. He had meant it when he said, "I'm never going to let you out of my sight." When they were in the Hollow, he was never far from her. Sometimes, when she was reading or napping or feeding the little dragons outside, she'd turn to find him there, leaning lazily against a wall or tree, watching her shamelessly. Evangeline thought she would grow used to his presence, to Jax sauntering into rooms or to waking up beside him every morning. But even after some months, seeing him smile still managed to give her a flutter of surprise. Being with Jax was strange in the same delightful way it's strange to experience a warm day in the middle of winter, or to find a surprise meteor shower upon looking up at the sky. It shouldn't have been possible to love him more than she already did, but she supposed that every day she was a little bit different than she had been the day before, and she imagined it was that little bit that fell more deeply in love with him each day. Evangeline could happily have stayed ensconced with Jax alone inside the Hollow forever, among the cheerful flowers, the friendly little dragons, and the lingering magic. The Hollow was not the same as it had been when the Mirstone had lived inside the clock in the wall, but it also was not as bereft as Evangeline had first thought it might be after she'd taken the stone. It seemed that when Evangeline had first taken the Mirstone from the clock, the Hollow had grieved. It had been robbed of its precious stone. Then, its only 2 visitors in forever had decided to abruptly leave without so much as a goodbye. Upon Evangeline's and Jack's initial return to the inn, the Hollow had actually been quite frosty. Doors often slammed shut, windows stuck, wardrobes refused to open, faucets yielded only icy water. "I think it's cross with us," Jax had said. "Give it a few days, it will warm up." The walls had rattled then. "If it doesn't, we'll leave," Jax added, tossing a dart up in the air as he spoke. "We can build a new inn, a better one." Jax caught his dart, then drew it, purposefully missing the board and sinking the dart's sharp tip into the wall instead. Doors stopped slamming after that, windows no longer stuck, and wardrobes were more eager to open. As the days went on, the hollow became friendlier and friendlier. Fresh flowers started to appear on tables. Evangeline found new logs in the fireplace every morning at dawn, and whenever she drew a bath, the water was always perfectly warm. The hollow wanted them to stay. Soon it became apparent that it wanted others to stay there as well. The no vacancy sign kept falling off the hollow's main sign welcoming travelers and adventurers. Jax was quick to reattach the little no vacancy sign, but after 3 straight weeks of the sign tumbling to the ground and getting stuck in the mud, Evangeline had taken the hollow's not-so-subtle hint, as it was ready to reopen for guests. And so it was that on a sunshiny morning that smelled of honeysuckle and strawberries, Evangeline marched out to the welcome sign with 2 buckets of paint, buttermilk white and a lovely shimmering dragon treasure gold. The no vacancy sign had already fallen to the ground, and Evangeline left it there as she dipped her brush into the buttermilk. Carefully, she painted over the old welcome sign, and then once it was dried, she carefully rewrote the sign with her dragon treasure gold. The Hollow, inn for travelers, adventurers, and those searching for happily ever after. When she painted the comma between travelers and adventurers, Evangeline felt the final broken heart scar on her wrist begin to tingle. She didn't hear him approach. Jack's footsteps were always preternaturally soft, but she heard him make a disappointed noise, somewhere between a grunt and a sigh as she finished painting her last 3 words. "That's not going to work at all," he muttered. "Why not?" Evangeline spun around. Jax was dressed in olive green trousers and a cream shirt that was rolled up at the sleeves and only halfway buttoned. His golden hair was tousled, and as always, her heart did a little flip as she looked up at him. "What's wrong?" she asked. She was rather proud of her handiwork with the sign. She'd been practicing painting her letters, and she thought they turned out rather nicely. Jax frowned, sullen lips turning down at the corners. "I think it will attract too many people." She laughed. "That is the entire point of an inn, silly." His frown deepened, possibly at being called silly. This made Evangeline smile wider. Then Jax was taking hold of the ribbon around her waist and tugging her closer to him. She'd noticed before that he couldn't go very long without touching her, tucking hair behind her ear, toying with the straps of her gown, coming up behind her and pressing kisses to the back of her neck as he wrapped his cool arms around her and whispered things that often made her blush. "I don't want anyone here but you," he muttered. Then, in one of his lightning-fast moves, he deftly stole the paintbrush from her fingers. "What are you doing?" she squeaked as Jax released her from her waist and swished the brush across the sign, adding 2 letters right before the word, happily. "There," he said smugly. "It's fixed now." Evangeline scowled, as did the little blue dragon who'd been perched happily on the sign. The greeting on the sign, still swinging from Jack's handiwork, now read, "The Hollow, inn for travelers, adventurers, and those searching for unhappily ever after." "No one will come if it says that," Evangeline said. "Don't be so pessimistic." Jax carelessly dropped the brush back in the bucket. "People will still come. They'll just be a little cursed if they dare to stay here." He showed off a dimple as his smile returned. Clearly, he liked the idea of cursing their guests, although Evangeline imagined what Jax really enjoyed was tormenting her. She had to admit, she actually liked it when he teased and tormented her. She had once told Jax that she would gladly take an uneventful happily ever after, but truthfully, she would much rather have this life with Jax, which would never be uneventful. Evangeline still believed in happily ever afters, of course, but she hoped to have lots of happiness with Jax. But she was less certain about the uneventful part. She no longer wanted to sit quietly at the end of a story. She wanted to keep stepping into new ones. She wanted to love, to discover, and to fill. She wanted a life that felt like running through a field of wild flowers, and then finding a gate at the end that led into an enchanted unknown. And she wanted to do it all with Jax by her side. Hey, bookworms! Thanks so much for listening. Wasn't that just the cutest bonus epilogue you've ever read? To me, it is canon and always will be. So thanks for listening. And please, please, please don't forget to subscribe and like this video. I'm trying to grow my booktube channel so I can do this more often. Thank you, thank you, thank you to my super fans. I love you all. Bye.